So there we go. How you doing, Adija Wolf?
Doing well. How are you? How about you, Gerry?
I'm doing great too. I'm great too. So I'm so excited about linking up with you here, and I wanted to ask you a question. And we've had so many great conversations that I wish we had recorded, um, but we'll record this one. Um, so here's the question I have for you, Addi. I know you've got quite a bit of experience in your life so far. Um, if you could share one thing, one idea with absolutely everyone on the planet, all 7.8 billion people, with how many there are, if you could share one idea with everybody on the planet, what would you want to share with them?
Well, that's a big question. First thing comes to mind. I guess it would be, no, everything's an inside job would be the biggest. That's kind of the umbrella to all of it, whatever it is. However you're seeing anything, it's an inside job. Whether it's art or music or painting, that, or whatever you're perceiving, however life is going, it's an inside job first.
No, I love that. I love that. So, we get so preoccupied with pointing to things in the outside world that are wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
That and so what you're saying is, if I'm hearing you correctly, is that self-awareness is what it's all about, that we're projecting a lot, and right. the key to our happiness is found inside, right? Right. So
to make that a little more understandable, because I'm going, okay, so I can say, oh, it's an inside job. What's that mean? I'll meditate more, whatever. To me, the next step is that it requires responsibility. So like, what does it mean? It's an inside job. It means that there needs to be responsibility. The ability to respond, but to own, to know that that's your ability. That you have responsibilities, whatever, to yourself, to the world, to the family, that you have to be willing to accept that responsibility.
I like that.
That's a place where I think things are going a little askew from generation to generation.
So we all have the ability, we've got the ability to respond and a responsibility to be responsible, and how we respond, I guess.
Right, and how we respond. And to some degree, we've got a generation at this point that kind of thinks of responsibility as a burden.
Right.
They don't want responsibility. They don't want their driver's license. They don't want, they don't want a car. Then they gotta, it's easier to drive moms. They don't want a place of their own, because then they have this responsibility that feels like a burden, as opposed to, an important aspect of life. So, yeah, the inside job thing. It goes into Einstein, the one we always talk about, that you can't fix things with the same mindset that created it all.
Right. So we better expect, I love that quote from Einstein. So we better expect to be surprised with this, how we need to think, and the perspective we need to have in order to, if we want to see change, if we want to see improvement, because otherwise it's the same old, right? The same thinking. If we try to solve the problems, as Einstein said, with the same thinking, then we're,
right.
We're just going to keep
even the part of us that thinks we are against something. We're still part of it. If we're against it, then we're still in it.
All right. Well, actually feeding it, right? So if we're resisting it.
Right.
Right.
With a painting, that's like the point at which you flip it. You don't keep going at the same thing. You get to a point where it's like, either put it aside, come back in a while, or you turn it the other way so that you started an entirely new perspective.
Right. So talk to me about, life is an inside job. Art, you started with art as an inside job, and you're an artist.
Yeah.
So, how does that, how do you bring that idea of life as an inside job, art as an inside job? What have you learned from your art that sheds light on that being a truth?
Well, I've learned that there's like a connection between me and all my work, that if I'm not working, I mean, I found this years ago when I was in galleries, that if I wasn't working, everything's energetically stopped. Nothing in gallery sold, nothing, there was just no energy. And the energy, as we've often said, is like, 99% is getting the energy connected and getting there. And then painting is like a tiny part of it. That's kind of like the exhale. That's kind of the exhale. And if you push and try to make that the inhale, which is okay, but that will not be one of those moments where something really good happens. That you've got to like build up that energy.
Right. You've said so many times that, which, really surprises me, because I think painters, it's all in the painting, but you've said it's all about getting ready, that you spend 99% of the time getting ready, and then boom. Right.
Right. Just like life.
Right. Just like life. Right.
Yeah. Right.
And I love that. If we push, if we're not in the flow of things, right, and we push out of fear or stress or upset, then, like you said, you're not going to sell paintings in the gallery. That's interesting.
And so, yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's very different. I mean, as much as I say it's 99% getting ready, you still show up. You still have to show up. You have to set up the studio or go in the studio if you have one. With me, I have to set it up. Right. And even if I just stare at it.
Right. I got it. But doesn't that loop back to this inside job thing? Because that you're kind of, whatever you have to do to line this up, to line yourself up,
right?
The physical stuff and the whatever, that to be ready to then execute, and then it's an execution, right? It's a
right. And sometimes painting is part of that getting ready. Like you're not even really painting yet,
Right.
You're, like, you're putting paint on something, but it's still part of the getting ready to then do the work, which is still an inside job, but you're ready to use, you're ready to have the conversation.
Do you, over the years, I imagine, do you kind of can sense, you can feel when you're ready? In other words, you could have been painting for a few hours, but have you got that sense of that feeling of, there it is. Now I'm ready.
When it happens, yes. And sometimes it doesn't happen.
Right.
There's many a day you just go, well, this is an expensive hobby.
Right.
Like I just wasted a lot of paint. But you learn never to feel that way because it's there.
Right.
But let's say you'll never see all those layers when you look at a finished painting.
Right.
But you'll feel them.
See, there you go.
Okay.
Wow. So yes. And you also share that even though you felt needed something and you wanted to take the action to do something, you didn't want to ruin it, because he already kind of liked it. So there's this edge, right? I love that.
Life.
So that's amazing. So, but you got it.
Life right now on that edge of, well, and I don't want to make things worse. Let's say we don't need any more crazy energy added out there, but I may need to do something.
Right. Right.
Maybe I can't just let this canvas just sit the way it is. And maybe I need to do something.
Oh, it's so perfect. It's so perfect because, action, we're witnessing and experiencing the inner and the outer awareness. And yeah, you don't want to bring crazy energy to it. You don't want to add to that. So obviously opposing something is not, at least I've come to that conclusion, opposing and resisting something is not helpful.
Nope.
But there's a
Whatever
kind of
it is, that's exactly where what's been happening. It didn't matter what it was, but this
exactly
effort to get opposition,
exactly
opposition. And we, you know, for a long time we were kind of programmed to believe opposition is the answer. Opposition, you have to oppose everything, you know. But if you tear it down without something else in place, then all you got is a whole bunch of opposition.
yeah, and a big pile of rubble.
And a pile of rubble. And that's kind of where we are right now. Yeah, everybody opposing it, you know.
Well, it loops back to this idea of the inner that life's, you know, is an inner game, that and responsibility. So if it's irresponsible to just be resisting something, and which really feeds more of the division and the disruption and destruction, then the responsibility is to offer something, right? Something, not that I disagree with this, but ooh, I like, you know, this is something that I am for, you know. And then, you know, I think that's a big responsibility. And I love this idea of the inner game, because the more you feel secure here and unconditionally love here, the more you focus. I think what my experience has been, you're focusing on what you appreciate in life, you know, what's beautiful in life.
Right.
And, you know, that's art, you know.
Grow that.
Right. And so then the action, what we're drawn to take action to, is more creating something than trying to break something down, right? And yeah,
it's often in this last few years when I've seen kind of this image of this side and their hats, okay, and this side and their hats, and you know, I've said, what if everybody just traded hats, you know? But I've often also just seen, at some point, let's say everybody's been, you know, in this metaphoric opposition. There we are, you know, I'm on this side, you're on that side, and it's hot and everybody's hungry, and you just go in with, you know, like lemonade and cupcakes for everybody. Like, kind of like Babette's Feast, if you ever saw that movie.
What's that movie?
Babette's Feast.
No.
Oh, it's an excellent movie. I believe it's Italian. It's an iconic movie. And Babette she's a servant, a cook, just a servant. And she works for this aristocratic family. And so the generals and the military, you know, these very people are always the ones that she's feeding, and they're kind of, and so she inherits some money. And instead of like doing something for herself, she spends it all on creating the most amazing meal. She goes out and buys these little Cornish hens, and she makes a meal that is so amazing. And she feeds it. There's so much love in this meal.
One meal.
In one meal.
Oh, wow.
And she feeds it to this table of opposing and military and the healing. You don't even need the subtitles.
Oh, right. Wow.
The healing of the love in this food just brings everybody to the same place.
Wow. So, well, you know, I love that. And what that comes to mind is this inner game, is that if we're focused there, I think we can't help but discover that inner place is something we all have in common. Right. If we're there, if we come from that place, then the stuff that's different is not a problem. It's just, it's interesting. It becomes, all that different stuff becomes real interesting, different stuff, you know, beauty, right? But if we're not coming from that inner game, you know, which is that inner security, that unconditional self-love is kind of another way of saying that, I think, is then we're looking, we see what we don't like in other people, because we're projecting what we don't like in us. So I love that. So she gathered these opposing forces to one table,
Right.
and fed them the most amazing meal, which
Right.
they all had this common experience of an amazing meal.
She fed them the love.
Yeah, and the right, and that resonated. So that's that. I have to watch that. You have to send me. Yeah,
I'll find it. Send you a link.
Oh, good. I'll definitely watch it. And you said at that point you didn't even need the subtitles, huh?
No, no. Well, especially for someone like me who understands the ability of love being transferred by food. I mean, it's a way to love people.
Well, and that, you've mentioned, correct me if I'm misstating the phrase, but the art of love, or it's like the art of
there
war.
was a book called The Art of Fear.
The Art of Fear.
Art and Fear.
Art and Fear.
There's also a book called The War of Art, But for years, the books that were being written that were selling, millions of copies, and art students were, they were part of the reading list. Art and Fear, Art and Fear. And for me, it modeled the idea that we had come to in this civilized world, that art was the way people managed their psychosis and kept themselves from cutting off their ears. And there was a lot of that too. Okay.
Oh yeah. Okay.
There was that.
Van Gogh was one, right? Yeah.
Right. Like that thing Matt Haig says, humans as a rule don't like mad people unless they're good at pain. And even then only when they're dead. But that art is the way we cope with the fear. And that was where the philosophy, let's say, of art had gotten in the civilized world. Jackson Pollock, the Pollock syndrome.
Sure.
Jackson really was a terribly depressed, horrible, mean, crazy person, but he got very successful.
Right. His art is awesome. Yeah.
And everybody wanted to be Jackson, but maybe Jackson was not doing what he was doing to cope with the pain and the fear, which was that model, like I have to do this or I'll explode. Maybe what it really is that activity is the reaching towards the love. That it's always about reaching towards the love. And it seemed to me that when you take 2 generations of artists and turn them into like the soup can mentality, and turn it into this idea that it's always about rebellion and it's always about, the darkness. And I'm not saying all art was that, because otherwise it's a happy face or a flower pot.
Right.
Yeah, we just dismiss that.
Right.
But the true art was being born out of a deep response to the pain. And what if we were, really thinking and talking and teaching, or I don't like the word teaching, but inspiring that art is reaching to the future.
I love it.
Always future.
Right.
Every time you buy another pencil or a painted tube, a tube of paint, every time you buy another canvas and you go, what am I doing? You're reaching to the future. Because the minute you tell something, you go, oh, great, I could pay a bill. And you go, no, I could buy paint.
Yeah, right. Or I can make a meal.
Or I can make a meal.
Right. For some people.
You're reaching towards the future.
Oh, it's such a huge distinction, Addi, that I'm getting. Huge distinction. And so is art a reaction to suffering? This way of kind of articulating and communicating and expressing suffering and free, liberating and whatever, and actually reaching for love.
Right. It's
a reach. It's not a push. It's not a, I love that. So, and that's a great word. Yeah. So the art of love, is that, so that's the phrase.
That was always where, for me, it was instead of art and fear, it would be art and love.
Art and love. Right. That's huge. I mean, and then if we're working on the inner game, if we're coming from that place, and then that the idea of reaching for a future, right, as opposed to stabbing at a a reality.
Right. Well, I think I've told you this before. I was
I
living
love
in
it.
living in an art district in a city at one point, like in warehouses and stuff. A lot of young artists, a lot of very young artists. And they were very angry people. At least they perceived themselves as such. And so they had a show one time and they called it Vomitorium.
Nice.
No one came. And no one came.
Surprise, surprise.
I was like, but they were art school educated. I've seen some of them since, and they've really come way past that. And I was like, wow, they were educated in a way to be suspect or to feel less than or flimsy if their art, I mean, it might be the same painting, but if their take on that painting was a little less, I'm trying to shove it in their faces, it would be different.
Yeah. Yeah.
It would be very different. But
Yeah.
their attitude was, I want to shove it in their faces.
Right. Right. So if you could get them into a mindset of reaching, I wonder if that would be a very different experience for them, right? That might be difficult, right, for them.
Oh, and many of them, like I see, have come a long way.
Right.
But I was very aware that art and fear and that art school education, that they kind of perceive themselves as this was their job to offend, let's say.
Right. To shake things up.
Right. And here we are now, full circle. And when you end with this, I saw a quote in the last few days and like, do not pray for people to change or like change their mind. Ask that their consciousness be raised.
Yeah, I like that.
I did too.
So what I like about that is that's this external internal thing, because if we want people to change their mind, that's an outer game, right?
Right.
We want them to change. But if we understand that there's a truth, there's this common truth that surrounds love, right? Which is what that woman who made the meal, right? Which she brought, that all we have to do is hope that they raise their own consciousness, that they stand up in their own responsibility.
Right.
And if they do that and they play the inner game of life, everything's going to work out.
Right.
And they'll know what to do, and
Right.
they'll change the way they need to change. It may not be the way I expect them to change.
Right. They may not change at all.
And whatever they do, they may show me a way that I didn't see before.
Right.
And what a gift that would be.
What a gift that would be.
Right. So good. So we brought it full circle.
Okay.
So excellent. I enjoyed this so much. Addi, thanks so much for spending some time with me. It was a great journey down the path of the inner game of life. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Gerry.
All right.
Always good to see you.
Always good to see you too. All right. Take care.